Hey everyone, Brian Zane here with my review for NXT 2.0 on October 5th, 2021. The WWE draft has concluded. That means there's a couple weeks to go for all the brands to wrap up whatever remaining storylines, or try to at least, for the talent that are moving from show to show. NXT is not immune from that. There's a few stars that are jumping ship to Raw or SmackDown, so we'll see how those storylines start to take shape and what direction they're going to go in beginning on this show. It begins with a match between Mandy Rose and Ember Moon. I like the Toxic Attractions, a special entrance they get here. Each lady gets a close-up of them posing provocatively, and the camera then slowly drifts off and crosses off to the next woman. This match was okay. Ember taking out Mandy's goons early on outside, but it allows Mandy to take advantage. Ember makes a comeback, hits a tremendous forearm to the mush of Mandy Rose, but she does come back, hits a big flying knee attack to win the match, like clean as a whistle. Like Gigi Dolan and JC Jane are not a factor in this finish here. That was pretty impressive to see Mandy win so decisively. It was pretty good for what it was, building Mandy up as likely the next contender for the championship after what we saw them do to Raquel Gonzalez last week. My question is, where does Ember Moon fit in with NXT 2.0? This is somebody who was in the original NXT, went up to the main roster, got hurt, and then came back to NXT and had a bit of a revitalization, a bit of a revival for her career, it seems, and she was a tag team champion, and then Shotzi got called up, and she's been kind of like aimless ever since then. So I hope they find something for her soon that sticks. We get a shot of the announce team, and I love how casual Vic Joseph is dressed here. I mean, Wade Barrett calls it a members only jacket, and Beth Phoenix gets about 4 seconds to talk about what happened and how they felt about Seth Rollins breaking into her and Edge's house before they move on to the next thing. We get a video package from Legado del Fantasma where they talk about their rivalry with Hit Row, and now that Hit Row is being drafted to SmackDown, Santos Escobar's challenge Swerve to a match for the North American Championship. We then get a rebuttal from Hit Row later in the night where they accept that challenge. I think we all know what's going to happen with that one and when the match happens next week. Odyssey Jones takes on Los Angeles Knight in singles action up next, and some good back and forth here and really taking advantage of the size difference. At one point, LA tries to pick him up for a slam, but he basically keels over and gets squashed because Odyssey is so heavy. And then when Odyssey looks good in his comeback, did somebody say Andre Chase? He appears on the apron, he gets knocked off the apron, and then Knight capitalizes with a neck breaker and wins the match. And the little subtle thing at the end there is at one point Odyssey sticks his leg out for a rope break, but Andre just pushes the foot back in there before the referee catches it. And so LA wins kind of in a double sneaky way thanks to Andre Chase. They're building that angle up with he and Odyssey. I think it was a short and sweet match. Jones has a lot of upside. He did look good here for the most part when he was going against the much more experienced Knight. Cameron Grimes interviewed backstage. He talks about how all the different ways love is in the air at NXT, and so he wants a piece of that action. He wants to find himself a mate, a pretty lady as it were. Then Pete Dunne and Ridge Holland interrupt and kind of mock him for that, and Pete challenges him to a match later tonight. Cameron kind of shrugs him off and then goes off stage to try to hit on some other ladies. So I guess we're getting that match later, and I guess another wacky storyline for babyface Cameron Grimes. Elsewhere backstage, we see Von Wagner hanging out, and Kyle O'Reilly approaches him and says, "Hey, why have you been helping me the last couple of weeks?" And Von basically says he took an opportunity and jumped on it, and he respects Kyle and everything. And when it comes to trust, then Kyle cuts him off and says, "Hey, after the year I've had, I don't really trust anybody right now, so I'll let him handle his business," is what Kyle says to Von, and we'll see how that plays out later in the show. Tommaso Ciampa makes his way to the ring. He declares that Halloween Havoc is returning to NXT in a few weeks, and he asks who has the balls to challenge him for the NXT title at that show, and somewhat predictably, Braun Breaker answers the challenge. He calls Ciampa out in the ring and says he wants a shot at the title at Halloween Havoc. Ciampa responds by saying, Braun, you say you want the title. I need the title. You think this championship is a stepping stone for you, but this is everything that I've worked for. It's my lifeblood, etc. He tells Braun he has 3 weeks to go from being an intern to a PhD. He accepts the challenge, then aggressively hits Braun's shoulder on the way out of the ring. So now it's pretty much all but official. It gets confirmed later in the show, but it's a big test coming up for Breaker at Halloween Havoc. I'm very excited. Seems very much they want to strap the rocket to him. I wouldn't be surprised if that's the show where he wins the championship, but time will tell. And a lot of people have kind of brought the historical significance of a Steiner challenging for a championship at Halloween Havoc, because last time that happened was Scott Steiner at Halloween Havoc 2000. We get a Joe Gacy promo where he says he is the voice of a righteous and inclusive generation. There is that holier-than-thou aspect of the character, kind of similar to Stephen Richards in Right to Censor. A lot of people made that connection, the whole for your own good sort of thing. He says that there can be two winners in his safe space, which is very interesting. He also says NXT is the one platform that will not crash. It is one of the many references you will hear tonight about the Facebook Instagram outage we had earlier in the week. Then we get a bit from earlier in the day where Indy Hartwell's chatting with her friend Persia Parada about the honeymoon last week, and it's not even innuendo. It's just full-on sex talk, basically, where she says, oh, I wore Dexter out. That's why he's not here this week. We went through 2 packets, she says, and makes a very thinly veiled allusion to like how big Dexter Lumis is. They see smoke coming out of a room. They open the door. That just happens to be where Mei Ying's throne has materialized this week. She's there and Boa's there, and then Boa slams the door in their face, and that's pretty much that. And that's the setup for a match we'll get later in the night. Ikemen Jiro takes on Joe Gacy next. I love Gacy's entrance video stuff where the words are like inclusivity, acceptance, and there's a peace sign, like really laying it on thick here what the message is. I love how Gacy tries to encourage Jiro in this match. I believe you have the strength to knock me down. Try it again. Gacy avoids the big kick and hits his springboard, his handstand springboard clothesline to win the match. Then afterward, he picks up Jiro and gives him a hug, and then it cuts to Jiro's face and he looks totally confused as to what just happened, which I thought that was brilliant. And suddenly, like, I'm totally all aboard the Joe Gacy train right now with this gimmick. As he's making his way to the back, though, he looks up and sees someone in the crowd. It is a bald Parker Brudeau, I think is how you pronounce his name. He was a prospect for a while, very kind of like a young Brock Lesnar with like different tattoos is the best way to describe him. But he shaved his head. He had like short tuft of blonde hair, and now it's all just he's just shaved bald now. So that look, I'm not in favor of that. But we've got the stare down here, and so what does that mean? What's Parker's deal with Joe Gacy, and where's that going to lead, I wonder? Duke Hudson is this generation's The Gambler. He's cutting a vignette while wearing his in-ring gimmick and talks about how he's very smart and can beat you mentally before he beats you physically. And then we see Cora Jade in her NXT debut taking on, at first it's supposed to be a woman named Virginia Ferry, but she's taken out before the bell rings by Frankie Monet, and so now Monet is the new opponent. And she's just wiping the floor with Cora for the first few minutes. Cora's boyfriend, Trey Baxter, shows up to cheer her on and everything. Frankie goes to the Glam Slam, but Cora counters it into a roll-up to win the match in a pretty big upset here. I think it's a bit of a shocker. It was kind of a one-sided match, so we didn't get a whole lot of like what Cora can really do. She got a couple, maybe 1 or 2 offensive moves in, but it was mostly selling. So you got a good idea of how she sells, which was good. But now she's got momentum after this big win. Like suddenly now, like Cora Jade is like in the conversation. So we'll have to see how they book her from here. Backstage interview with MSK. They are asked about the 8-man tag match that was originally scheduled for the main event being changed to a fatal 4-way for the NXT tag titles, and they're very fine with that. But you got GYV showing up saying, oh, they're dodging us in a straight up one-on-one fight again by having these 2 other teams to pin. And MSK said they want the title match to be an elimination style now. GYV accept, and then you've got Briggs and Jensen walking in. They has fight. Carmelo Hayes and Trick Williams joining in as well. And so that's pretty much how the main event is established now. Then we get an interview after the break with Tommaso Ciampa, and he's asked, how do you feel about Braun Breaker answering your challenge? And Ciampa's like, cool with it. And then Joe Gacy walks in, and I love what he says here. Basically, he tells him the way that Ciampa, expressed his challenge, like who has the balls to face me. You're not being gender inclusive when you say that, Ciampa. And he also says he's abusing his privilege as NXT champion, and he wants to be included in an opportunity for the championship. So Ciampa says next week we'll have a singles match, and if you beat me, you'll be added to the triple threat match. So I'm really curious. It's crazy the trajectory that Joe Gacy's had the last 3 weeks, from debuting to a lot of attention, allegedly being written off, coming back with a vengeance, and now he's suddenly got his finger in all these different pots where it's like you're starting to wrap your head around the Joe Gacy character to begin with. And then you've got this thing where they're planting seeds with him and Parker Brudeau. And then you've got this thing where he is, even if he's probably not going to beat Ciampa next week, probably not going to be in the title match at Halloween Havoc, but the fact that he's orbiting the picture this early into the run of NXT 2.0 shows me that I think he's got a promising path with this gimmick. And so it took a couple of weeks for me to kind of get into the groove, but I'm definitely, buying what they're selling with Joe Joe Gacy, and I'm curious to know how that character is going to evolve over time. Cameron Grimes takes on Pete Dunne next. A relatively brief match, but still a lot of great action packed into this thing. As the match goes on, Ridge Holland tries to interfere, then Kyle O'Reilly shows up to try and stop him. But in the chaos and everything, Pete Dunne takes advantage anyway, ends up winning the match. Then afterward, the two of them, he and Ridge, beat down Kyle O'Reilly for a bit, stands tall at the end of the segment. But then during the break, we see that Von Wagner has actually helped Kyle up. So he's not totally leaving him alone just yet. And we actually find out later in the show that next week, Von and Kyle will team up against Ridge and Pete. And Von tells Kyle, whether you like it or not, I'm the only one who has your back right now. So again, this where they're going with Von Wagner right now, kind of like they've latched him on to Kyle O'Reilly. Can he be trusted? Can he not be trusted? I think it opens itself up to a couple different directions. And with like Ridge Holland now on his way out of NXT, I think there's another chance for possibly, him coming in as another heel against Kyle. Maybe he will be the new muscle for Pete Dunne once Ridge leaves. Who's to say? But next week's tag match should be a lot more illuminating. It's finally time for the long-awaited debut of Tony D'Angelo as he takes on Malik Blade. And you know what? He gets one of the biggest reactions of the entire night. It's a strange mixture, from what I could hear, of cheering and booing, but no matter what the actual percentages were of that, it was definitely loud for sure. And you know what? He's even wearing a velour tracksuit. He's a man after my own heart. Lots of Tony chants as this match goes on. Again, he is definitely one of the most vocally well-received characters on the entire show this week. It's not a total squash match. Malik gets a couple of big moves in, but the story here is obviously D'Angelo. It's a big twisting fisherman's neckbreaker to win the match, and the fans love it. You know what? I'll admit, I had my reservations about the gimmick the first couple of weeks I saw the vignettes, but I know it was getting a very big following online. So I like I said, I kind of waited, I bid my time. I was going to wait and see what happened. And in the early going, it seems to have a following. And again, one match does not tell the whole story. We'll have to wait and see how the character evolves, how he performs as a wrestler the longer his matches go. And we'll just see where it all ends up. But right now, Tony D'Angelo is off to a great start, a positive start on NXT. We get the match with Indy Hartwell and Mei Ying up next. It's only Mei Ying's second match on NXT. And so, like her last match, a lot of no-selling in this one, not really registering Indy's attacks. And then on the outside, at one point, Persia Pirotta actually takes a bullet. She takes a big boot from Mei Ying for her best friend. And then in the confusion, Indy shoves Mei Ying into the ring post, hits her with an elbow drop back in the ring, pins her, and beats her. Like, what the hell was that? And then as they're celebrating, Mei Ying sits right back up. She no-sells that. Great. What was the point? And then you got Indy, who does not look at all scared about that whole fact. If you see someone sit up after you beat them, that you go, oh my God, nope, doesn't really register it. Like, what was that about? Like, what a way to kill that entire Mei Ying gimmick in the span of just like 2 weeks. Why would you even do that with a character like that? You're trying to build her up as something otherworldly and supernatural. Are you going to tell me that The Undertaker, would that have been a cool thing for in the first few months of his in-ring time in the WWF for him to lose a match? Oh, it's okay, because he sits up afterward. No, you have him win the match and does not register the stuff. That was so confusing. At the beginning of this character's trajectory, for her to lose, okay, she sat up at the end. She still shouldn't have lost. If she could do that then she should have done it before the 3 count. It just reminds me of Bray Wyatt at Hell in a Cell when the Fiend gets knocked out and everything, but then after the bell rings, oh, he snaps back up to life. That would have been helpful so much earlier is all I'm saying. Backstage, Lash Legend talking to some extras about the big debut she had last week. Tony D'Angelo shows up and says, hey, maybe you should put me as a guest on your show in the future, and that'll get you some ratings. And then the whole segment ends with Lash kind of telling her friends how she's responsible for Facebook and Instagram shutting down. Well, somebody on the show had to take credit for that. Then we get a Diamond Mine vignette where Malcolm Bivens breaks down, introduces all the different members of the group and what they have to offer and their background, their experience and everything, ending on Roderick Strong as the centerpiece of the group. I thought it was a really nice vignette, again, really making them look like a team of killers and elite athletes, and Malcolm Bivens being the mouthpiece for them, I think is great because he's a hell of a talker, he's a hell of a character and a personality. I hope the whole thing is not meant to be ironic based on what we saw in kind of their behavior in the ringside area the last couple of weeks where it's the gang beating and everything. I guess you can pull it off, but I feel that group needs to be more badass without being dirty about it. I guess if I had to compare it to something, it'd be kind of like ROH's Foundation, where it's they fight a certain way, but they don't fight dirty, they kind of fight with honor. And so I kind of felt Diamond Mine was kind of a similar vein, just from what I just kind of gleaned from seeing this group. I could be wrong, but I think it's possible to be heels and be badass, but also not be heelish like that. But we'll see. There's an in-ring segment with the women's champion Raquel Gonzalez. She asks Mandy Rose if she knows what she's gotten herself into now that she's made the champion mad, and says that what Sarray did to Mandy's face weeks ago is nothing compared to what Raquel will do to her. And then Toxic Attractions show up, Mandy on the microphone. Get a lot of what chants from the crowd here, which at first Mandy does shut down, but then they get right back into it. Like, God, these fans, I thought we had moved on past what chants, folks. I thought that we all got that out of our system after a 13 or 14 year period, and now we're finally kind of getting over that. But nope, NXT fans bring it back. You hate to see it. And then you got Gigi Dolan saying that they're all championship material, and JC Jane saying that they are the face of NXT 2.0. They go to surround the ring, kind of reminiscent of last week, but then you've got Io Shirai and Zoe Stark saving the day. The champions standing tall as the heels leave and everything. It feels like we're getting a 6-woman tag team match playa in the future. But before we get that, though, we get this segment backstage with Stark and Shirai confronted by Indy Hartwell and Persia Pirotta here, who want a shot at the belts as well. And, you know, Zoe brings up the fact that they actually beat Indy Hartwell to gain those belts in the first place. And Io says the only time they're going to be wearing gold is on their finger or on their ears, in reference to Persia's earrings. So it doesn't take a whole lot at this point, but right now the women's tag team division in NXT is booked just miles ahead of what the Raw and SmackDown are doing right now. It's a whole other world right now. Main event time, it's a 4-way elimination match for the NXT tag titles as MSK defend against GYV, Briggs and Jensen, and Carmelo Hayes and Trick Williams, who are the first team eliminated after Trick is laid out by MSK. Get a nice pair of back-to-back blind tags a few minutes later, which allows Briggs and Jensen to eliminate GYV after they take Zach Gibson out. And that was kind of a surprise to me because it felt like the way they were setting up the 4-way elimination, it'll be down to MSK and Grizzled Young Veterans. We obviously don't get that in this one. It's down to Briggs and Jensen and MSK. And after a couple of minutes of, the bigger guys kind of throwing their weight around, Powerbomb is countered into a roll-up by Wes Lee, allowing for the champs to win and retain a pretty solid match. We get some sportsmanship afterward from the losers, the final challengers. Then afterward, Imperium jumped the ring and they beat up MSK for a bit. Briggs and Jensen chase Imperium out of the ring, but a lot of the damage had already been done. And so that's how they stand tall as Imperium stands on the stage and everything, and MSK's recovering. Like I said, solid main event to close out the show, and then you've got this kind of intrigue over the tag titles right now as kind of a way to kind of build things up for next week. My grade for this week's NXT is a C+. I felt it was on a very similar level to last week's episode, but I like where they're going with a lot of the people. And just in the last few weeks, we definitely have a very clear picture of which particular stars at this point they are pushing, and I'm very excited about most of who I see. I'm very interested in Braun Breaker, very interested in Joe Gacy. I'm even interested in Tony D'Angelo. This week made me, converted me into a fan of his, I have to admit, but we'll have to see what happens with him. There's a couple acts I'm still warming up to, but a lot of things seem to be headed in the right direction as we get closer to Halloween Havoc. But what did you think of the show this week, folks? Which up-and-coming stars are you interested in? Which ones are you not so hot about? Let me know in the comments section below. I'm Brian Zane, and I'll see you next time.